Hello, and welcome to Neverwhere Chapter 2. So, before we get started, I wanted to say that the prologue, we had this spooky lady saying, "Oh no, beware of doors, doors, whatever." But you had this very, weird, oh my gosh, this is probably plot important moment. But then you get to chapter 1, and after all this mystery of waiting to find out who this mystery girl is, you find out, plot twist, her name is Door? What? Good thing we had that prologue bit. So Richard totally knows this is important, right? But he doesn't. I mean, us the reader went straight from the prologue to chapter 1. But, I mean, that was years apart in Richard's life. That was one drunk night years ago from a lady he doesn't remember at all. So Richard doesn't have those warning bells going. They're not even warning bells for us. It's like a giant flashing neon sign. But Richard doesn't have that. And so if you were like, wow, Richard, how did you not know that that was a thing? Well, that's probably why. And but yeah. So that was a thing. And I meant to say that and I didn't. But now I've said it. Also, welcome back. And chapter 2 is 20-something pages. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It's like 26 or so. I checked and I forgot, but it's something like that. And chapter 2 opens with italics. And you know, if it's italic, something weird is happening. Like, is this a flashback? Is this an alternate scene? Like in the last chapter, we flashed between the different storylines of the girl, who we now know as Door, and Richard, and the two villains. So some were in italics and some weren't. So we kind of got that jumpiness last chapter, and this chapter, chapter 2, opens with a long sequence in italics, and we're playing the pronoun game of he this, he that. So you don't know who he is until the italics ends, because mystery, right? So our italics begin. He is somewhere deep beneath the ground, in a tunnel perhaps, or a sewer, and he is walking, and he can see. So there's a light source defining the darkness, not dispelling it. So he's wandering around in the dark, and there are people running, and they're splashing through the mud and the filth, and so he's going in the opposite direction. These people, he's walking slowly against the crowds of people that are running away from something, and he turns a corner, and there's a beast waiting for him, and it's not defined as an actual animal. It's like a combination of a beast, because he thinks it could have been a boar or an ox or a bull or a tiger. So it's kind of this very, very ambiguous, overly large, because the body fills the space of the sewer. So yeah, it's this huge ambiguous monster just looming, taking up the whole space, which would be claustrophobic, because you're already in an enclosed stone area, and it's dark, and now there's this thing as big as the area you're in. I mean, you'd be more afraid of the beast, but if you were already worried about being claustrophobic, that would definitely make it worse. So giant monster, undefined giant monster, which is kind of scarier, because in Beowulf, okay, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain in Beowulf, you don't get like this 100% solid description of the monster. Like for most of the story, you've got like the people that are being attacked and stuff, but you don't get like the solid description of the monster, because it's a lot more scary that way, because like these people are dying and whatnot, because the hall is being attacked, and you're waiting to find out what is this thing killing people, and it's more scary almost not to know. And I'm pretty sure maybe most people know this, don't know this, I don't know, and I could be totally wrong. I like half remember things. I'm like, oh, I probably heard this once in like school or like the internet, so it's probably true. So this could all be wrong. But like, anyway, so like whether you're thinking of like the video game or the movie or something else or a comic or whatever reincarnation you're thinking of, Beowulf, like originally like the epic poem saga and whatnot. Um, yeah, is so yeah, so it was like a told story, and then written, and you could read it as well later on. But originally it was like a recited story. But so it was more scary, like because you're being told the story, so you have to picture it in your head. This monster, and not knowing is like your mind just makes the worst thing you could think of when you hear all these horrible things happening, which I think is what this beast is like, because it's very ambiguous, and you just kind of fill in the blanks yourself. So you kind of jump to like what would scare you the most personally. And that's a good thing to do when you're creating a monster. I mean, if you make it too tangible, it's not quite as scary, perhaps, because maybe the thing you're describing isn't actually scary to your reader. Um, but anyways, wow, I might need to edit that out. But wasn't very productive. Now I feel like I should go Google Beowulf. All right. Anyways, uh, back back to the story of a dream inside our story. So our pronoun game, he. He suddenly has a spear in his hand. It's not like, oh, he picked up the spear, like, oh, he had been carrying a spear the whole time. It's just that weird dream sequence of like logic makes sense in a dream, and just magically he didn't have a spear, now he does. There's a spear in his hand. So he's facing down this monster that's huge and filling up the area. He's got a spear in his hand that just kind of materialized, but he looks down at his arm. He's like, "That's not my arm. It's ginormous and covered in hair, and not like normal, like, because if your arm probably has some hair on it, but it's like the monstrous giant furry muscle arm." And yeah, so and he's gonna face down the monster with but he kind of almost looks like a monster because his nails are almost claws. So he is a bit beast-like, and then the beast charges him, and he throws the spear, but it's too late. He feels the sharp tusk, like sinking into his flesh and such. And there's just like this gory description of him fighting the beast and losing because he threw the spear too late, and the beast just totally caught him off guard. Like he was prepared, he thought he was prepared to fight, and he was, oh, I'm gonna go in and give this my all. But before he could even really get any hits in, he's being gutted and gored and like ripped to ribbons and shreds. Like, he falls face down in the water, and the water is running crimson, because his innards are out, and his innards are on the outwards. His innards are on the outside, and he tries so to scream. He tries to wake, but he can breathe only mud and blood and water. He can feel only pain. So yeah. So not a good dream. Not the kind of dream you want to be having. And it trails off. And then that was Richard's dream the whole time. So Richard wakes up. So that was dark and horrible, which poor Richard, he had a rough night last night, and apparently sleep was not a relief because this was a pretty messed up dream to be having. But he wakes up to the girl asking him if she did bad dream, question mark. So she's like, "Oh no, did you have a bad dream?" And he's like, "Yeah, damn, was it obvious?" But not really, paraphrasing, because we're moving swiftly along, except not unless I edit out that Beowulf tangent. But that doesn't feel like in the spirit of this, does it? All right. So he wakes up, and the girl, he's just kind of eyeing the girl, eyeing himself, like they're pretty gross and grimy. He had carried her last night, and so like he got mud and blood down him. She's still muddy and bloody. They're just both gross, and he's kind of like, it's all sinking in, like, yeah, last night really happened. I just let a stranger into my house who was like bleeding to death. And he describes the clothing she has on as if she had done a midnight raid on the history of fashion section at the Victoria and Albert Museum and was still wearing everything she had taken. So that's the largest museum of decorative arts and design. Decorative arts versus fine arts is, so like a fine art is like when you think of like like a painting or a statue. Like, it's that thing was created simply to be looked at. Like, you make a painting so people will look at the painting. You make a statue so people look at the statue. Decorative arts is like functional, a teapot that's super pretty, or like an engraved, some kind of like a vase, or just anything functional. So like an ornately carved bench, something like that it's meant to be used, but it's also a work of art in itself. Which makes sense that if they had a history, a fashion section, and she was like, oh, here's an 18th century dress, oh, here's a 19th century thing, 16th century so like he's saying, yeah, she's got all this weird mismatch of fashion, and so she's dirty, she's filthy, she's got these layers of weird clothing from all through time, it seems. And she's confused, and so is he, because she's weirding him out, because he's like, what is this mess that I've gotten into? And she's confused. She's like, where am I? Who are you? And he's like, oh, you're in New Mansions, Little Comden Street. And she gets up and runs over and opens the curtains, and just, like, she's so fascinated and amazed, like she's blinking into the sunlight and looking all around and just like, where am I? What is this? And he's like, Newton Mansions, like he's very much like, it's just my address. And she's all breathless and wondering, and she goes, I'm in London above. And Richard's like, yeah, you're in London. Like, that's a weird way to say it. What are you above? And so they're just both really confused. Like, they're not on the same wavelength here. He has no idea what's up with her. She's equally, well, not equally confused, but like she's confused enough. And then he's worried and confronts her, like, look, I found you covered in blood. You need to see a doctor, or at least, like, let me see what's up with you. I don't know if my phone picked that up, but my cat is being, there's noise. There may or may not be cat noises in the background. Okay, anyways. So he wants to address the fact that he found a person covered in blood, and like, you need medical attention. And she's like, oh no, it's fine. Most of that was someone else's, which, like, that's not a reassuring thing to say, because that's not. It's like, oh shit, is there another person we need to go save? Does that mean, like, you just killed a dude? Which we know she did. We read that last chapter. She killed the dude. But anyway, so, like, that's not how you reassure someone, but apparently that's how she reassures people. So she asks for, hey, do you got bandage? The back and forth continues, but she's like, yeah, we should actually deal with this. So they go into the bathroom, and they're clean. She's, getting antiseptic and, like, cleaning up her cut on her arm, because that was, like, the worst of it, was when she had been cut in the arm. And so yeah, cleaning up, bandaging, that kind of thing. And the bloody water reminded him of something, some kind of dream he had once had, perhaps, but he could no longer remember exactly what. So, like, that creepy ass monster dream we opened the chapter with, he's already forgotten it, which last chapter he kept forgetting things as well. And so I kind of want it, just, Richard's very forgetful, and I don't know if he's just a very forgetful person, or if, like, there's something, like, some magical voodoo that makes him forget things, but we'll leave that for later. But he's very forgetful. But they're kind of just back and forth, like, help me bandage my arm, and what's going on and such. And he's asking her these questions, but she's not really answering any of them. And she asked his name, Richard Mayhew Dick. So he gives her options, I guess, and was like, I don't know if he goes by Dick, because everybody calls him Richard, but yeah. So just a bit of back and forth, and then the doorbell rings, and so he's like, oh shit, I bet that's Jess. This girl's still in my house, and this is gonna look horrible, and, like, he's really stressed out about how is he gonna explain this to Jess. And so he's like, here, just stay here, and runs to the door, and opens it, but it is not Jess. It is our villains being ridiculously villainy, because they're in black suits, and Richard, who is sartorially dyslexic, That's a good way to describe it. Sartorially dyslexic. So like you're bad at like tailoring and clothes and fashion, like, and such. So like he's not very into style, but even he can tell like there's something off with the way they look. And they remind him of a fox and a wolf, and he just automatically they look weird. They creep him out. They're very strange. And they're like, oh no, we're brothers, and our sister's gone missing, and she's crazy. She's a crazy girl. She needs help. Her name's Doreen. Have you seen her? And they have like wanted posters and such. And he's like, no, sorry, never seen her. But I mean, they hand him a wanted flyer with her face on it, and it's clearly Dor. And he's like, nah, sorry, never seen her. And they don't take no for an answer. They literally barge in his house, and they're like, ah, fuck you. We don't believe you. We are gonna go look for her anyways, because we know she's here. We can smell her. And so they do. But Richard's like, oh my god, there's nowhere for her to hide. I have this tiny ass apartment, and my bathroom is tiny, and there's nowhere to go. That she can't hide from them for long. And he had left her bandaging, like, from bandaging her up in the bathroom, and the guys push into the bathroom, and the jig is not up because the bathroom is sparkling clean and she's nowhere to be found. So Richard's like, what the hell is happening? Like, yes, good, they didn't find her, but what the fuck? Where did she go? Why is everything clean? And that just, he's baffled but like relieved. And the guys that barged in look around, like they take a minute to look around, but they don't find her. So they do take off. But they're like, you will tell us if you see her before they go and such. And they start, as they leave, they're hanging up posters of wanted, like of the wanted posters. They're hanging them up all around the street and such. And then as they leave, they're talking about like, do you believe him? Like that he had never seen her. And he's like, I could smell her, which is a way, like, no, of course not. She's definitely here and such. So they're not off the trail. They just couldn't find her for sure, but they know she's around. And Richard's like, what the fuck? Where did you go? Well, he's wandering around his house yelling hello, and he doesn't say what the fuck. He picks up his phone and his phone rings and he picks it up, and it's Jessica's voice coming out of the answering machine, not the receiver. So like he picked up his receiver to answer the phone call, but it didn't work. And it's Jessica calling to say, like, look, our engagement's over. I'm not giving you the ring back. I'm never going to see you again. It's just done. Bye. And so that kind of destroys Richard a bit. And then the girl says, was that bad news? Like real casual, like she's just standing behind him in his kitchen holding, yeah, so she's standing in the kitchen, her arm is nice and bandaged and clean, and she's putting tea bags into mugs, and the kettle is boiling in the background. So she's acting like this is no big deal. She's like, oh no, I'm sorry you had some bad news. Good thing I got tea on, because that's what British people do. You're happy, have a cup of tea. You're sad, have a cup of tea. It's just, yeah, is that racist? I'm pretty sure that's true. It's true. In my limited experience, it is. And so you always need a cup of tea, I guess. But she's just chilling, and he's like, you were vanished, you were gone. Like, Richard kind of has, like, this mini freak out, like, where were you? You were not in the bathroom, you were not anywhere in the house. I watched two guys tear my house apart looking for you. What the fucking hell are you doing staying there with the tea? Like, the kettle is boiling, there's tea happening, like, where were you? I saw you weren't here, and now you're here. And she's like, oh no, I was here. And just kind of doesn't explain and just goes about her business. And he asks her about the flyers, and she's like, no, of course you're not my brothers, don't be stupid. And no, my name's not Doreen, my name is Dor. I actually like the way she says that. She says, I'm Dor, Richard Mayhew Dick. So, like, she took it seriously when he was, like, stuttering to answer his name earlier. And so he has to correct her, and he's like, no, it's just Richard, which I just think is funny. I like that. So they're going back and forth. She makes them tea. They sit down and they're talking, and she's like, thank you for saving me. And And he's like, oh, I couldn't have left you there, which is like a really dumb thing to say. Like, Jessica literally told him to leave her there, so that's not really true. And Dor says that. She's like, no, you definitely could have, but you didn't, so thank you. And they're watching out the window because our villains, Mr. C and Mr. V, they're like coming out of a bakery across the way and like talking to people and hanging up posters and such. And then she yells, breadcrumbs. And he's like, what? Because they're having a conversation, and he wanted her to call people on the phone to look for help. And she's like, no, I can't get a hold of people I know on the phone. I need breadcrumbs. Like this aha eureka moment about bread. And Richard is like, sorry. Like, that's not what Richard sounds like. But he says sorry, and he's super confused. But she's all excited, and she grabs the bread out of his kitchen and runs to his bedroom and climbs up on his bed, because there's a window behind his bed, and the window behind his bed looks out like onto like a fire escape and a roof and such. And so she climbs up on his bed, fully dressed in shoes, with a bag of bread, and leans out the window and starts crumbling bread up along the rooftops. And Richard's just like, I don't know what's happening. And she's like, no, of course you don't. Now be quiet. Shush. So she kind of dismisses him. Sorry, I need a drink. She goes back to her breadcrumbs, and she attracts a pigeon, and she reaches her hand out, and the pigeon hops into it, and she pulls it in, and she sits down on the bed with the pigeon, and she's like, Richard, hold the pigeon so I can tie a note to it. And Richard's like, the book describes him as not an enthusiastic holder of pigeons, even at the best of times. And he's like complaining, why are we doing this? It's not, you have to train pigeons to do this. Pigeons don't just do this. Why are we doing this? What? He's just kind of muttering along. And she's like, no, don't be ridiculous. Of course you don't. Let me do my thing. And I need a normal pigeon. It'll work. Believe in me. Hush. So she takes a note and writes to it, a note out, and uses a little blue rubber band to tie it to the pigeon's leg. And her and the pigeon talk to each other. She burbles. Is that what they say? Yeah. An impatient sounding burble. Oh, that's the pigeon talking to her. Hold on. She made a noise that sounded like the liquid burbling of pigeons. So they're talking, her and the pigeon are talking back and forth for a couple lines. And so, I'm sorry, said Dora, you know what you're doing, of course. And she took the bird to the window and let it go. So the pigeon is delivering messages. Richard is amazed and weirded out. And Dora's like, oh, this is totally normal, because she wanders off and picks up a copy of Mansfield Park from Richard's bookshelf, and so she like picks the book off his bookshelf in his room and goes out to his living room and sits down and just starts reading. Like, it's like she had just sent a text from her phone. She's like, oh, yeah, sent a text to my mate. Things will be all great. I texted my mate and things will be great. So I'm just gonna read your Jane Austen while we wait, mate. Honestly, I don't know. It's really cliche to say your favorite to say that your favorite Jane Austen novel is Pride and Prejudice is like cliche now, because there's been so many movies and shows, and it's like, oh, well, of course you like that one, but like it really is my favorite still. I mean, I don't know, it just is. I love it. I don't care if it's cliche. Not that that matters. I'm just saying. I mean, Mansfield Park isn't bad. I wasn't saying that either. But yeah, so so she's reading. Richard just is confused as shit and trying to talk to her, like, is your name Dor short for Doreen? And she's like, no, my name's Dor. And he's like, well, how do you spell it? And she's like, Dor, Door. You know, you have a door, Richard. And like, she's very like to the point, and he wants to keep talking, and he keeps questioning her. Every time she tries to pick the book back up, he's like, got another question. But she doesn't give him any real answers, and she's just kind of non-answering, even though she's replying. Like, what kind of name is Dor then? My name. What are we waiting for? A reply. So like, she just kind of just fuck it, and they're answers, but not. It doesn't solve any mystery. So they're waiting for a while. And then there is a rat that runs across the floor, and this is a little while later, and Richard freaks out and throws a remote at it. And Dor yells at him, like, why the hell would you do that? That was a terrible thing to do. And he's like, it was a rat. That was scary. There shouldn't be rats in my apartment. Oh, what is this, New York? And like, she's like, that was a horrible, rude thing. Like, you shouldn't throw remotes at people and or creatures that are sentient, which apparently pigeons and rats are in the story. So she is like, gets down on the floor and she's coaxing the rat out, and she's like, I'm so sorry, that was so rude, please come out. And like, her and the rat are carrying on a conversation, and the rat finally comes out and runs up and cuddles her, like runs up her arm and sits on her shoulder and cuddles her neck, and they're talking back and forth, and she makes Richard apologize to the rat, and he doesn't want to at first, and he does, like, and she's like, no, he means it was horrible of him. And so Richard's apologizing to the rodent, she's talking to the rat, and finally there is a note on the rat, and the rat is like very much kind of glowering. Yeah, so the rat's got an attitude with Richard. And she takes the note, and the rat takes off on its own ratty way, wherever rats go when they're not delivering notes. And then Dor gives the note to Richard and is like, you need to read this. It's a message from the Marquis. And I meant to look this up, actually, because it's Marquis, and I think it's Marquis, but I'm fairly certain it's not. I think it's Marquis. Like, I'm pretty sure. Like, maybe it is like a Marquiz, but I think it's Marquis, but I could be wrong. So for this chapter, I'm gonna say Marquis, and if I'm wrong, then I will know, because I'll look it up after this. In the next episode, I'll say it correctly, whatever way that may be. And this is a show. This Neverwhere is a show, so I should I've not seen it, but I should probably watch it, and then I'll stop fucking everyone's names up, because I'll be like, oh, that's how you say their name, because I'll watch the show. So I'll try to get on that. And that might be fun. That might be something to add to these, to compare. Anyways, so it's a message from the Marquis, and Richard is gonna go and find the Marquis for her. So the note has instructions that you have to follow the directions verbatim. If you don't follow the directions, that you won't find him. So they're very nitpicky. Like, you have to turn left and take this many steps. You have to turn right and turn a certain direction. Like, they're very nitpicky, and it says, like, follow them exactly or it won't work. And he kind of is. He doesn't think it will. He's very skeptical. Like, as you follow his passage through London, he's like, oh, I've been to these places. This is silly. I know that these places don't go anywhere. I'm pretty sure that's a dead end. So he's all kinds of skeptical, but he does it anyways. And the last direction on the note has him standing in this alleyway that is a dead end, turning Windershins, which is wonderful. Windershins is such a good word. So counterclockwise, Windershins means counterclockwise. He's turning Windershins in an alley, and like thinking how silly this is, but doing it anyways. And the Marquis appears out of what he had originally thought was an empty alleyway. The Marquis is like standing up, like, just he had been crouching down and stood up, and out of nowhere the Marquis is there, and he's apparently very attractive, dark-skinned, so I would think like African American, because that's my first, because it says white teeth and an extremely dark like face, so like that's what I would think to picture. Well, I guess not African American, because I'm from America, and that's what I think, but it's probably black, like, because he's in Britain, so yeah, like, that was stupid of me, yeah, so, but Marquis, is that British or French? So, okay, anyways, attractive black guy, but he's dressed, like, really eccentrically. He has on not a frock coat or a trench coat. It's something in between, just a black fancy coat that isn't a frock coat, not a trench coat. It's just some kind of strange coat, and high black boots. Um, and yeah, so yeah, he grinned and such, and he's the Marquis, and the Marquis and is just another one of these magical, weird, strange, eccentric creatures. Like, we have Dor, we have our villains, and now we've got the Marquis, who is appearing out of nowhere. And he's like, "Oh, you're Richard Mayhew. You found Dor, who's wounded, and how is she and such." And they go back and forth. And Richard finds out that Dor's family has been killed during the conversation, because it just kind of the Marquis says it like casually. And then he's like, "You're here to barter. What is she going to give me if I help her?" And he's like, "I don't know. She didn't say a money amount. She said something about a favor, a big favor. I don't know." But that gets the Marquis's attention, because at first she was like offended, thinking like, "Oh, she didn't offer me a thing," but he finds out he was offered a favor, and he's like, "Oh, I want that." And he's excited now, and he's like, "Come on, no time to waste. Let's go." So so he does. He drags Richard off and is like, "Come on, let's get a move on." And he pulls a sewer, like a circular, I almost said sewer grate, but it's not. It's a manhole cover. Yeah. So the circular manhole cover thing, he pulls it off out of the ground, and he's like, let's get a move on. And he lights what looks like a sparkler, but it's not a sparkler because it doesn't burn away. And so it's him and this red glow coming from the sparkler, and he's dragging Richard along and through these tunnels underground. Climbing down the ladder and through these tunnels underground, and he's like, no, Richard's firing off all these questions, and the Marquis is not answering any of them. He's like, basically, haha, no. Like, you think I'm going to answer your questions? That's not happening. So Richard's just like, has to keep up with him, because they're in the complete dark underground, and the only source of light is the stick that the Marquis is holding. So he's just kind of forced to tag along, because where else would he go? He's no idea where he's at. He's no source of light. And so finally they get to a ladder to climb up out of the tunnel they're in. And then between one rung of the ladder and the next, just like that, it goes from the darkness of being in a sewer to the daylight. And the Marquis says, "When we get into daylight, don't look down." "And why not?" asked Richard, but before he even finishes saying why not, the daylight hits his face and he looks down. So, like, literally, he was in a stone underground chamber, and when he lifted his foot up from one ladder rung to the next, he was, boom, in broad daylight. So, that's where, like, you get this weird sense of travel that happens in these books. Sorry, I don't know why I said books, plural. But the weird sense of travel of, like, being from one spot to the next, and he looks down and he freezes, because Richard has this horrible fear of heights. And he's in this way, I don't even know, there's not a measurement, but just, he's so high above the ground, people look like ants. So he's way up there. So he's frozen himself on the ladder and doesn't want to keep climbing. And the Marquis like, "You can climb, or you can stay there till you fall and die. Which you will. You will fall and you'll die. There's no climbing back down. You have to go up or nothing." So Richard does finally make it to the top of the roof, and there's a guy at the top of the roof who is making soup out of starling, which is kind of sad, because, like, a starling is a little bird, and, it's like a small, medium bird, but a starling is a bird, and we just had sentient pigeons and sentient rats, so it makes you wonder, like, are all small creatures sentient in this story? Are all creatures sentient? Are like pigeons sentient, but starlings aren't? Like, is this soup made out of creatures that you could, like, speak to if you're Dor, or like Dor? It's weird. It's I don't know. I'm just saying, it's hard to want starling soup if you ever would have wanted it to begin with. And they're on the roof of this building, and the man is called Old Bailey, and he's the guy who's up there and making his soup and such. and he is wrapped. Yeah, he's wrapped all about with ropes, and he's got it in feathers. And the Marquis says he's calling in his favor and gives him a silver box, larger than a snuff box, smaller than a cigar box, and a good deal more ornate than either. So that could be, remember we had that talk about fine art versus decorative art. That could be decorative art, an ornate box. That would totally fit under decorative art. That could, anyways. So the Marquis says, you have to keep this safe from me. You've owed me a favor for 20 years. I'm calling it in. So apparently, like, favors mean a lot. That's why he was so excited when Dora was going to give him a favor for helping him. So favors mean a lot in this society, these people that we're meeting, these characters. And so the Marquis says, let's get a move on. And then we do, and they keep on going, strode off across the roof and such, and spiral at staircase. And so they're going down this staircase, and again, Richard is firing all these questions. The Marquis is not answering any of them. And then they get to the bottom of the stairs, and it's completely dark, and Richard is expecting there to be more stairs, but he stumbles because he thinks there'll be more stairs, but now they're on flat level ground. And so they're running on flat level ground, and Richard bangs his forehead into something, a doorway, and so when they come out of the doorway, they're in a broom closet in the stairwell of his apartment building. And so he looks behind him, and there's no doors, there's no entranceway. He's just in the broom closet of his apartment building. So again, that weird travel of like between one step and the next, you're instantly in a new place, but you can only get there by going a certain way, which is this weird dreamlike way of travel that you kind of have to get used to because it happens a lot in the story. And Richard is rubbing his forehead and blinking in confusement, and he's like, you know what, I'm just going to accept all this craziness. He has not had to be fair, this is insane, and Richard's not had like a mental breakdown. He's not had any, like, he's been dragged along on all this craziness, and he's still going along with it and trying to help this girl and such, and I mean, and props to him, because this is a pretty wild day. And remember, it was daylight on that roof they were just on, but now they're back at his apartment, and it's nighttime. And so time is funny, traveling is funny, it's just very weird. What's that Doctor Who quote? The timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly. You know, everyone knows that. Okay, yeah, it's like a quote I see a lot. It's done enough. It's a thing. I don't know. Help me, Doctor Who fans that are, yeah, whatever. Maybe that was a bad comparison. I honestly don't know the context that quote is usually in, so that might have been shit. Whatever. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, any Doctor Who fans, that I just may have butchered an important part of your fandom. Fuck. So anyways, they're back in his house, and Dora's like, thank you, Richard, you did it, this is awesome. She's very happy. She's clean, she looks like she took a bath since he's been gone. She's impressed that Richard managed to find the Marquis. The Marquis is all formal and goes down on a knee and says, my lady, and she's like, oh no, stop it, let's get on with this. You want a favor, I want help, let's work this out. And we need to go, we need to get out of here, the sooner the better. And Richard's all like, you're leaving? And she's like, oh, I'll be safe as I can be. And he's like, oh no, where are you going? And she's like, you don't want to know, I'm gonna be out of your life, and you're better off for it, and you will be much safer. And she leans up to give him a kiss on the cheek. She went up on tiptoes, so she's a lot shorter than Richard, and kissed him on the cheek as friends kiss friends, which I think is rather sweet. I mean, like, it makes a very nice picture of, like, this goodbye of, you helped me and such, and, like, and I appreciate it, and I don't know, if she had just, like, run out the door and, like, never said a word, like, I'm leaving, bye, I don't know, it's just nice, and I like it. It's a nice little closing scene for the chapter, but then, of course, we have to have weirdness, because that's the kind of story we're in. Because she says, look, I'm sorry. And he looks down at his feet awkwardly and says, there's nothing to be sorry about. In fact, it was fun, he added doubtfully. But he looks up, and there was nobody there. End chapter 2.